Imagine your podcast editing is so good that your viewers can't resist watching until the end. This isn't going to happen if you continue editing the same boring way as everyone else. So in this video, I'll show you the 3 techniques I use to blow up my clients' podcasts, how to implement them yourself, no matter what type of podcast you're making, and I'll share a sneaky trick they use in Hollywood that will make it impossible for viewers to click away. But the first step to excellent editing happens before you even open up your editing software. I want you to imagine you're going to a retirement party of a colleague. At this party, there's a bunch of people in their 60s and 70s who grew up listening to, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and maybe the Beach Boys. But the strange thing is, the 20-something DJ at this party is playing stuff from his era. All the guests are walking around covering up their ears and complaining about the noise that this generation considers music. That's the importance of appealing to your audience. Something that one group of people love could be hated by another group, and you can't please everyone. So you have to get clear on who you want your podcast to appeal to. How can you do that? Let me introduce you to a tool called Swipe Files. This is a powerful tool that advertisers and marketers use. Every time they see an ad they like, they save it to a file to give them ideas for their next ads. Here's how it works. Let's say I see a podcast I really like. I like the title, I like the thumbnail, so I'm gonna screenshot it. Then I'll drag that screenshot into a document. Next, when I'm watching that podcast, I'm paying attention to the format. Is it highly edited? Or maybe is it a raw conversation like Joe Rogan? Is there music? Is there an intro? What I recommend to you is to create your own swipe files. So to do that, open up a blank note page on the note-taking app of your choice, on your cell phone or your computer, it doesn't matter. And every time you watch or listen to a podcast and think, that was great, that would work well with the audience I want to attract, capture that in a note and ask yourself things like, what was the title of the podcast? What was the format? And how can I apply that to my topic, my niche, and my audience? And start to build a bank of inspiration to inform your own style and desired audience. Now you know how you want your podcast to look and sound, but none of that matters if you can't get them to watch in the first place. So how can you do that? You can get people interested in your podcast by stealing a technique from Hollywood. I'm talking about movie trailers. When you see a movie trailer, they don't show you the quiet moments at home, the family gathered around the dinner table, or the main character stuck in a cubicle at work. Instead, you see the hero covered in blood, stepping out of an exploding car, or maybe he's got an automatic weapon in one hand and firing it and holding off an entire platoon. It gets you excited to watch the whole movie, to see those moments, even though that may be a very small part of the whole thing. So what's that have to do with your podcast? This technique is what I call the trailer tactic. Similar to a Hollywood movie trailer, you're going to put the most interesting 10 to 30 seconds of the entire podcast right at the beginning of your episode. Here's a couple examples of shows that do it well.
In order to be successful, you need to know that people have a small number of slots in their brain for who they remember. So you've got to get into people's head. And in order to do that, you need to know 2 things. The first one is 7-11-4, which we'll talk about.
An idea is like an asshole. Everyone has one. Okay, ideas don't mean anything.
This guy is known as the Indian Warren Buffett.
Boom. Now that your viewer is hooked, how do you keep them watching throughout the rest of the episode? Imagine you're watching the nightly news. The anchor is covering all the important stuff from the day, the water skiing squirrel and other breaking stories. Well, imagine that instead of showing the squirrel or cutting to a correspondent on the ground, the camera never changed and the anchor was just describing the scene. That would be really boring, right? Instead, they're cutting to correspondents on the ground. They're showing videos of the weather if that's what they're talking about. They're showing the face of the pundit they're interviewing. You need to do the same with your podcasts to keep them interesting. So how can you do that? So here I am in a Descript project, and this was recorded in Descript Rooms, which is like Descript's remote podcasting software. And This particular one has 4 different tracks. It comes from the weekly group coaching that I do for the Descript Mastery School, which is the course I have. Highly recommend that because this is going to go fast and it's a more advanced skill. So what I'm going to show you is multicam. And again, I recommend checking out the Descript Mastery School to go deeper on how to do this, but I'm going to at least walk you through the steps. So when you have a recording from rooms, you're going to come to Layer, and then you're going to select this part that says Multicam, click this drop down, and click Automatic Multicam. And then you're going to be able to choose a style. And this is what this is going to do is change between speakers, like I showed you with the news reporting example. And you can choose whether it changes automatically to include cutaways, where the speakers are side by side at parts, or if it's only going to show the person who is currently actively speaking. And then you can choose how frequently those cutaways happen, if at all. You can also select none. And you can choose the camera setup, which will be done automatically for you if you're using Descript Rooms. It's also going to put these into a layout. So if you haven't seen layouts before, or you want to know how to make them for your automatic multicam, be sure to check out the video in the top right corner. Otherwise, I'm going to hit submit. And it automatically split up my video so that there are side-by-side views. There's parts where all 4 speakers are on camera at once. There's parts where it's just the active speaker on the screen, and it varies between those throughout the entire video. So that is a quick way to make your podcast a lot more interesting. Now your podcast is looking good, and I mean really good. In fact, it's so good that viewers and listeners won't be able to help but to watch it until the end. But none of that does you any good if you get frustrated and quit because you're spending too long on your edits. Click the next video on your screen to see how you can edit your podcast in just minutes, not hours.